Hello, everyone, and welcome to our first webinar, live webinar for coaching skills for managers. I am Kris Plachy, your instructor. I am so glad that you're here and that we can communicate kind of live. So thank you so much for taking time out of your day today. We decided to create this webinar series because we do get a lot of questions from all of you. You are a very engaged bunch, those of you taking this course, and wanted to figure out ways that we could do a deeper dive into some of the content that you have definitely expressed interest in, and also try and answer some of those questions that you might have, especially the ones that we seem to get quite a few of. So welcome, and we're going to go ahead and get started. So today what we decided that we would focus on is the thought model. As you know, this is a pretty central part of the coaching tools that I teach in Coaching Skills for Managers. It is, to be honest, when I teach the thought model to people, I have taught this over a day or over 5 days, full days. So it's a deep concept. It's not something that we just are able to learn really quickly and then move on. It is something that we have to practice every day. And I've been using this tool in my coaching practice for let's see, upwards of 13 years now. And so it just is something that I'm constantly using even in my own day-to-day life. So doing a little deeper dive, hopefully answering some of the more common questions that you all have. And then we'll hopefully have some time for questions here at the end. Dan is online with me and he will be fielding those and letting me know what questions you have. So what are we going to talk about today? We're going to talk about some of the most common thoughts that we experience at work, whether we're managers or employees, and then we're going to talk about how to wrap the thought model around those, both for yourself and for coaching individuals who may be dealing with some of the challenges, some of the results that they're getting as a result of those thoughts. So as a reminder, this is the thought model, and I'm going to walk through this more specifically, but just visually I wanted to make sure you remembered what we were talking about. So circumstances happen, they trigger thoughts, thoughts cause feelings, feelings cause actions, actions cause results. Our results will always feed the originating thought. That will always balance out, and that what we do is we call that as a negative spin cycle. So the thoughts that we think generate the results that we get, so that reinforces the thought, and it just keeps spinning, 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 right? So how we use the thought model, we use it 2 different ways. The first way is to actually diagnose why we're having some sort of performance problem. We ask ourselves, what happened? The circumstance is always a provable fact. It's always something that actually happened in the world, okay? So what happened? My boss sent me an email. My employee came in late. My employee told me they hate their job. My colleague said I'm hard to work with, right? These are things that we know happened that are provable. They are facts. They are also outside of our control. That's very important to remember about a circumstance, okay? The second question then is we ask, what do you think about that? What is it that you think about that thought, or about that experience? So when your boss sent you that email, what did you think? When your employee was late, what did you think? When your colleague said you didn't know what you were doing, what did you think, right? We have thoughts that come from our circumstances. A thought is a sentence that runs through your brain. Now remember, we have up to 60,000 thoughts a day, and we're not talking about noticing everything that you think. But what we are talking about here is recognizing that we are able to notice what we think as adults, right? So for example, if I said to you, don't think about a polar bear, excuse me, don't think about the color red, don't think about this, you will think about it. And you can notice that thought actually running through your brain. So when we think thoughts, sentences that run through our brain, they trigger feelings. Feelings are one word. They are emotions. They are happy, sad, glad, mad, worried, angry, frustrated, hurt, betrayed. Those are examples of feelings. Feelings, thoughts trigger different feelings in all of us. So we could think that the same thought and feel differently, right? So feelings are happening all the time. A lot of us are very in touch with how we feel and are very able to define how we feel, but a lot of us aren't. A lot of us actually express feelings in sentences. So instead of saying, I feel sad, people say, I feel like I want to cry. I feel like I'm really unhappy right now. Instead of saying, I'm annoyed, someone might say, I feel like it would be great if you would just stop talking. Right? So feelings are triggered by the thoughts that we think. And then we ask ourselves, when we feel this way, what do we do? What is the action that we take? So when I feel angry, what do I do? When I feel frustrated, what do I do? When I feel hurt, what do I do? Right? We all take different kinds of action based on our feelings. Two people who are both feeling anger could respond in their behavior very differently. One person who's angry could yell. Another person who's angry could pout, right? So we all do and handle our emotions differently. And lastly, how we act in the world triggers or helps us get the results that we have in the world. So if I yell at someone, I get a result. If I smile at someone, I get a result. If I talk with someone, I get a result. If I ignore someone, I get a result. So what we're talking about here are the results that we get, not the results of other people. Okay, so this is super important as we're thinking about this model. It applies to you, not to others, unless you're using the model to help someone else. Okay, all right. So then we look at the way that we go up the model. And when we go up the model, we're using the model now to solve a challenge, solve a problem. So what results do you want to have? What are you trying to? Sorry about that. It's not technology if there aren't problems, right? What result do you want to have? So you might say, I want to hold my employee accountable. And what do you need to do to get this result? I need to schedule a meeting. I need to review their performance. I need to set up my expectations. What feeling will trigger this action for you? I need to feel confident. And what thought do you need to believe to feel this way? I need to believe that this is the right thing to do. I need to believe that this is what I'm supposed to do as a manager, right? The circumstances never change, right? We might still have an employee who's late. We might still have an employee who isn't meeting goals, whatever that circumstance was. But the way that we help ourselves address the situation differently can change if we start at the bottom of the model and work our way back up. So that's just revisiting this thought model. I want to wrap this around your own experiences that I know I hear very commonly from the managers that I coach and work with, so that we can apply it to some more real world situations. So these are some of the ones that I have heard more consistently. Disengaged and entitled employees, having a boring job, having too much work to do, and not knowing what to do. These tend to be some of the most common things that I hear either managers deal with themselves or managers are dealing with in terms of the things that they hear from their employees, okay? And so for purposes of the time that we have today, I'm just narrowing it down to these 4 topics. And I'm gonna show you how the model applies. And I see there's quite a few questions, so I wanna make sure that you all know we're gonna do our best here to confirm that we can have time to chat with you all. So let's talk about our first example. Our first example is somebody missed a deadline. I'm sure that's happened to you before, right? The thought is my employee is disengaged and entitled. Oh dear, I've heard that word a lot lately, by the way, entitled. The feeling is that anger or resentment, feeling resentful. The action is to ignore the employee or to be short and dismissive with that employee. And so the result that I get as this person's manager is I'm actually disengaging. That's so interesting. And somebody, what do you think about somebody who ignores you? What do you think about somebody who's being short and dismissive? You might actually think they're sort of entitled. Look at that manager, thinks he's all that, thinks she's all that, right? Doesn't want anything to do with me. It's just so interesting, right? But who do we blame our behavior on? We blame our behavior on the fact that they missed their deadline. We blame our behavior on the fact that we think that they're entitled or disengaged. We believe that other people's behavior is justification for our own, but that is not the case. Our behavior is because of us. It's because of what we think about and how we feel. So as managers in the world, people who have assumed this responsibility to help other people perform and be successful, the first person you have to really be clear about is you. That your behavior is your responsibility. And if you're ignoring employees or being short and dismissive with employees, that is just not effective management behavior, right? And if I could see you all, I would hope that I could see you all nodding and agreeing with me. That's what I would hope for, right? So then we go back up to resolve this. So I would ask you, what result do you want? Well, I want to discuss the employee's performance with them, okay? And what do you have to do to make that happen? I need to review their results, I need to prepare a plan, and I need to schedule the meeting. And how do you need to feel to do that? Confident and focused. And what do you need to believe? Instead of focusing on the fact that you think your employee is disengaged and entitled, what else can you believe? I can believe that this is my responsibility to address this performance. The missed deadline still exists. That hasn't gone away. But do you see how much more effective I'm going to be if I change the way that I think about this circumstance? Right? And that's always available to me. Now, a lot of people think that feelings happen before thoughts. And I thought I would just address that because that viscerally, you're right. You will very well notice how you feel before you notice what you think, especially if you've been believing something for a long time, because our thoughts fire in our brain so quickly, nanoseconds, that the thought can fire and trigger an emotion, and then all we feel is, anger, hurt, embarrassment, shame. And we think that it's the circumstance that made us feel that way, right? Like I was with a group of leaders yesterday and they were talking about employees who've missed deadlines and they're all upset about it, like mad. And they think it's the employee's fault that they're mad. If the employee just wouldn't not miss the deadline, I wouldn't have to be mad. Like, no, that's actually not true. Employees can miss deadlines and you don't actually have to be mad. You're just defining the situation in a way in your brain that's making you mad. It doesn't mean that we still don't hold people accountable for missing deadlines. It's just, why would you need to be mad to hold them accountable? That's not any fun. It's not necessary, right? But the feeling of anger hits you quicker because that thought is something that you've believed a long time. And then, so if we feel bad, we need to kind of check in with ourselves and say, okay, why am I feeling so angry? Oh, I'm feeling really angry because I think this person is disengaged, entitled. That's why I feel angry, right? Taking responsibility for our emotions and our behavior. It's a key fundamental responsibility of managers who want to demonstrate managerial maturity, right? Okay, let's look at example number 2. Example 2, job duties. I have some. Don't we all? We all have job duties. Yes, we do. And so we can prove whatever it is that's in our duty statement or, things we did that day. The thought is, my job is boring. I'm sure you have an employee or two who has said this in some way, shape, or form. Their feeling is disengaged and unmotivated. When they feel disengaged and unmotivated, their behavior is potentially they show up late to work, they walk around the office, they talk to people all day. Yesterday, there was someone who said that I just have a chronic hider. Like they're gone. Like I can never find them. They're never at their desk. They're just always secretly hiding somewhere in the office, right? And so what's the result when you show up late, you walk around, talk rather than work? Well, first of all, you're boring. No offense, right? But you're not seeking out new work and you're not working. How can you even be engaged in your job if you're not engaged? So intriguing, right? But what do people blame their behavior on? Showing up late, walking around. They blame it on the job. It's the job's fault that I can't get to work late and that I'm bored. But no, actually, the reason that you're bored is because you believe that you're bored. What? Come on. Is it really that easy? Sort of. Result, focus and ask for new work. That's what I want. Okay, so employee, you've been here 12 years. You have a great career here. Right now, your results are you're late. You're not getting your job done. You might even be impairing your brand in your organization. What result do you want? I want to focus. I want to be more engaged. Okay. So what do you need to do? I need to commit to my current assignments, and I need to meet with my supervisor and ask them what else I can focus on, and maybe even ask for like a new kind of project. And how do you need to feel to do that? Engaged and eager. And what do you have to believe? This job right now is an opportunity for future growth. And what I always ask people is, do you believe that? Because sometimes they'll just say stuff to you and you're like, yeah, you don't believe that. Can you believe that? Because let's find something else you can believe that helps you feel engaged, right? So we have to check in, because if people believe or tell you that they believe something and they don't, then it's a lie in their brain and it's actually less effective. So we want to always check in. Like, can you believe that, right? And so the circumstance is still going to stay the same. The job duties are still sitting there. You still have this job, right? Okay, example 3, current assignments. You have work to do. The thought is there's too much and I'm never going to get it all done. I would be willing to bet some of you have thought that maybe in the last hour, right? What happens when you believe this thought? You feel overwhelmed and stressed out. What do you do when you feel overwhelmed? You avoid and disengage. Or if you're like other people, you write lists of what you need to do and then just notice what happens when you're busy writing your list. You're not getting the work done. So these are all things that we do. Overwhelm is such a tricky feeling because it's like this justification for paralysis. Oh, I have so much to do, right? And then what we do is we talk about how much we have to do. And can I tell you about how much I have to do? And then I say, can I go to lunch with you and talk about how much I have to do? We just always have so much to do, right? And so that's a important thing to remember in terms of our behavior, that overwhelm just drives really, really crappy action. It either drives confusion, it just drives paralysis and disengagement. And so I just really encourage you, as soon as you start to feel overwhelmed, or as soon as you identify someone who's feeling overwhelmed, we want to use the thought model, because overwhelm doesn't exist. It's not like a thing, it's just a feeling. And it can pass, but we have to work through it. So what result would we like? I'd like to get this work done by Friday. Get people to be specific. What we tend to do is just focus on all this work we have to do. Now, let's be clear. What will you get done by the end of the week? You're never going to get all your work done. Has anybody met that real situation when every bit of work ever in your life is done? Just curious, because I haven't found that out. It's kind of like laundry. Laundry's never done, or is it? Maybe some houses it is, not in mine. So the result is I'm going to have this done by Friday. My action is to outline a plan, ask for help, meet with John or Lucy or Sally, and set aside 2 hours each day to get it done. And make my commitment, right? I need to feel committed and focused. And the thought is I can accomplish whatever I choose to focus on. And do you believe that? Again, do you trust yourself? That's part of the problem too, is a lot of people don't even trust themselves. They book 2 hours a day on their calendar and they don't even fulfill it. Circumstance hasn't changed. We still have work to do, right? Okay, last one. I have a job. I don't know what to do. This is one of the most paralyzing thoughts we can think. I just don't know what to do. I feel confused. It's like my coach tells me when I tell her this, she says, confusion is a lie. Just keeps us stuck. We avoid, we keep asking for stuff instead of actually doing things, and we just put off work. We don't get things done. We don't find out what we need to find out, and then we still don't know what we need to do. We stay in a negative spin. So what do we do when we don't believe we know what to do? We start at the bottom. What would you like done? Well, I want to get this project finished, okay? What do you have to do? I have to ask for help. I have to start with what I have and set some benchmarks. I want you to notice something. I'm going to go back here if I can, sorry. The thing about this, action and result, this is something I do when I teach my live workshops. We really could put most things, anything related to work or even like our personal life, right? You could put, I want to save $400 million, and that's excessive, but I want to lose weight. I want to, you know, exercise, whatever. Whatever you put in this result line, accomplishing that result is really just math. It's just putting in what you want in that action line and doing it. But what happens is the top part of the model, the thought and the feeling part, which I call my nonsense. You know, if I look at what the actions are I need to do, ask for help, start with whatever I have by Monday and set benchmarks to get something done, it can be done. But I tell myself all the reasons why it can't be done. Oh, well, so-and-so's not going to be available, or it's going to take too much time, or I don't really know if I'm going to do it very well. And what if it's not what they want, right? And that's what we call our nonsense. That's all that thinking and feeling stuff that for us can interfere with our ability to just get it done. So achieving most results is just math. It's just a simple formula here, right? If I know that I need to ask for help and start with whatever I have and get it, set some benchmarks, how do I need to feel? Empowered. And what do I need to believe? This is one of my favorite thoughts when I do find myself telling myself I don't know what to do. I tell myself I'm in the process of figuring it out. And I learned that from Danielle Laporte, who's this brilliant, fun, really interesting woman. But it's one of my favorite go-to thoughts. I'm in the process of figuring it out. To me, that means I don't have it all figured out yet, but I'm also not stuck. Right? There are ways to figure things out. The circumstance remains the same. My job duties have not changed. I still have work to do, right? None of that is any different. So I know we're going to do a quick review. Sorry, I'm messing my slides up. Dan, you really should drive. I'm not very good at it. Okay, so here are a couple of things to say in summary, and then I think we can hopefully have some time for questions. So we want to use the model as a means of hearing what people tell you. And so what I often recommend for folks is that you use some sort of tool, even just a piece of paper where you write circumstances, thoughts, feelings, actions, results. And as you listen to people talking, you write down what you hear them say in the corresponding category. Right? So for example, I was just on a call right before this one with students in a program of mine, and we were talking about the fact that she is going to take over a program in her organization that's a team building program. And she said, I'm really afraid to do it. I'm really uncomfortable. I'm very stressed out because I'm not very confident in my ability to present to my team. I don't believe that they think I have the credibility to present. I think they're going to think, you know, who the heck does she think she is anyway? I'm not like my manager, and so I'm not going to be as good as him. And so these were the kinds of things that she was saying. So she shared with me that she was feeling stressed, frustrated, worried, anxious. Thoughts were, I'm not good at this. they're not gonna appreciate what I say, or I'm not gonna have credibility, right? The circumstance is still gonna be that she has to do this team builder. And some of the actions she shared is that I stumble on my words, I ramble, I'm unclear. And so of course the result that she gets when she stumbles on her words and rambles is that she reinforces for her that she's not good at what she does, right? So as she was talking, I was just writing down everything I heard her say. And I was corresponding it to each part of the model, because it's the easiest way to diagnose. Because one of the things that's really cool about the model is we can start anywhere in it to help someone improve. So in her case, for example, I said, how would you like to feel when you're presenting to this group? And she said, well, I'd like to feel confident. And I said, okay. And so what do you have to believe about yourself if you feel confident, to feel confident? And she said, well, I would just need to believe that I know what I'm doing. And I said, okay, well, can you believe that? And she said, yeah, kind of. And I said, well, what do you think you'll do? How will you act if you feel more confident? And then she told me she would be more poised and clear, right? So you can start anywhere in the model. What do you want to do? How do you want to change your behavior? What do you want your results to be versus what they are now? So you don't really actually even have to start from the bottom up to fix. You can start anywhere, yeah? But when we listen to people and we put things in buckets, circumstance, thought, feeling, action, result, then what we want to do is ask for clarification. Here's what I heard you say. I heard you say that you don't think you do this as well as your boss. Is that true? Yes. Okay, why? Right? Here's what I heard you say. I heard you say that you're really, really anxious. Is that true? And you just verify some of the things that you've heard them say. Now, sometimes people will hear back what they said to you and they won't like it. They'll be like, no, I didn't mean that, you know, and they want to change it. That's okay. You know, we want to give them an opportunity to redesign their results by asking them what they want to achieve and move back up, right? So the model is a diagnostic tool and a resolution tool. It's a way to help people who are struggling with some area of performance identify how what they believe about it is what's driving the results that they get. So many of us believe that the results that we get are because of the circumstance. And if that were true, then people who have all the same circumstances would have the same results. And we just know that's not true. So the varying factor in here is how we define our circumstances, and that's unique to each one of us. So with that, I'm going to turn this over. Dan, are you there?
I am.
Sorry for my bad driving, Dan.
No, you did great. You did fantastic. All right, so so everyone, I'm going to. We have a couple questions in the Q&A. We also have a couple questions in the chat in the Google Doc. So, Kris, I'm just going to verbally ask you some questions, and then for all the participants out there, if anyone has additional questions, please use the Q&A panel, and we'll try and get it to as many questions as we can. And Kris, some of these questions are definitely related to the content you spoke about today, and some others are a little bit more general to the courses themselves and other topics. So just to give you a primer there. All right, so our first question is from Sarah, and she's asking, when other people, I'm assuming she means the employees that she's either working with or she manages, forgets the work that they are responsible for doing. Mm-hmm. Because of our management? Is it because of coaching? What should she do?
Okay, so I just want to make sure I heard you correctly. She says that what to do when employees say they forgot what they were supposed to do?
That's what I'm assuming is what she means, yes.
Okay, yeah, so that happens, right? And we forget for a few reasons. And what I always look for in any situation is a pattern. Every now and then I forget, and Dan knows this about me. I forget stuff, right, Dan? So we all forget stuff. That's okay. It's when it's now you're starting to notice that there's a pattern. And what I would invite you to think about as a leader is that I like your question, is there something I could be doing differently? And the answer is always going to be yes to that, okay? And potential ways to do things differently. We could have them send us an email after we meet with them to clarify what the outline of the project is and what the responsibilities are. We could do the same thing and send them a note and say, hey, just to summarize our conversation, here are my expectations. Here's what my expectations are, what you will deliver and by when. So everything's kind of also in writing. It also is why I stress in this Coursera program the importance of a one-on-one, right? You absolutely, if you manage people, have to be meeting with your people one-on-one. And that can be once a week, once a month, once every 2 weeks. It just really depends on the cadence of your business. But if you're not meeting with people consistently, you're not communicating with them consistently in a structured way. You're just talking to them as they pass through your office. And that's too casual, especially if you have important work to do in the world. So one-on-ones are really, really, really essential. If someone continues to miss not complete or say they forgot about assignments, then we can try to coach them using this thought model process to help to find out, like, why do you think you're not completing your assignments? I forgot. Now, I want you to notice that I forgot is a thought. Like, we think it's all true. It's actually a thought. It's a thought about the fact that I didn't do the work. So it's interesting, right? For someone else, it could feel really true. So when you think I forget my work, how do you feel? What do you do? What's your result? But lastly, what I would add to this is if somebody forgets something more than a few times, that's a performance issue. And that's when we go into that, you guys might, if you're, depending on where you are in the program, the employee's performance continuum, right? Now we just have to manage. We have to address a performance gap. We have to say, look, you have missed the following assignments and their due dates. Here's the impact of the organization, and here's what the consequence will be if it happens again. And then we just address the issue. It's an accountability issue. But you want to acknowledge them when they also do it really well too. So both sides of that.
All right, great. Thank you, Kris. Okay, so Ignacio is asking, how do you coach someone who does not believe in this process at all? And they're thinking that circumstances simply dictate their actions and they can't do anything to fix that.
Yeah, those people exist. You know, I coach executives on my own, in my own practice, and I tend to coach the difficult executive. And so a lot of times companies will hire me to coach people in leadership roles who are causing some challenges in the organization. And one of the first things I always say is the first few conversations will be about willingness. And if someone is not willing to be coached and to change their behavior, then I'm not going to continue the relationship. And I think for you, Ignacio, this is important. There's two different things. First of all, you can use the thought model as a coaching tool without actually someone even knowing that you're using it, right? So you just ask the questions, right? You don't say, hey, I'm going to use the thought model. You just say, hey, I'm noticing that you're missing these assignments. What's going on? And they'll tell you, well, it's too hard. It's too complicated. You know, okay, so when you think it's too complicated, how do you feel? Do you feel frustrated or angry, irritated, overwhelmed? Yeah, I probably feel overwhelmed. And then how do you act? Well, I don't know. I can't get started. Okay. So what would you like your result to be? Like, you want to get the work done? Yeah. And what do you think you need to do to get the work done? Right? The key here, Ignacio, sometimes we share the model and then people are like, that's not true. Sometimes, and that's fine. I mean, that just becomes like a thought. To me, that's all I hear is you can disagree. It's just a thought you have. What matters most, if this is an employee of yours, Ignacio, is that their behavior and their performance has to improve. So ultimately, they can believe the thought model or not. What they have to believe is if they don't improve their performance, that's going to be a problem. So would they like your help to improve or not? Right? That's the key at the end of the day. And there are a lot of people who believe that their circumstances have determined everything in their life, and they're absolutely helpless to it. And that, to me, that's sad, because that just says there's so much potential that they're missing out on, but that's my perspective. But that's what I would say, is they don't have to believe it for you to use it, and they also don't have to believe it for you to be able to coach them and hold them accountable to performance.
Okay, great. So a similar question, I think, from someone who chose to remain anonymous is, what happens if you state the facts and your employee demonstrates anger at even mentioning the facts? They quickly become defensive and state that dates should be flexible, and when they're not, it's micromanaging. I suspect it'll be a similar answer to what we just talked about, but I wondered if you could address that sort of situation.
Well, so what you're hearing in that, right, is that the employee thinks, can you read the top part of that again?
Sure. It's what happens if you state the facts, so they're working through the thought model and they state the circumstance, and your employee demonstrates anger that you're even mentioning the facts. They become defensive and state that perhaps, it sounds like there's a question here about when something is due. The employee states that dates should be flexible, and that, you know, the person is micromanaging them.
Yeah, so what's happening is the thoughts that this employee has, right, is that the facts don't matter, right? And sounds like there's another thought, you're micromanaging me. So that's what's happening, right? You present the facts just sit on the table. The facts don't make them defensive. What makes this person defensive is how they're defining the facts in their mind, right? So first of all, I just want you to experience that as the coach or the manager. Because facts are facts are facts are facts. I cannot like the facts. I can, you know, my dog barked. I don't know if you heard her in the middle of this webinar. Like, I don't like that happened. And ooh, I don't want to talk about that. That's annoying and embarrassing, but it happened, right? That's for me, right? So, okay, but my job as your manager is to hold you accountable to performance. I'm not micromanaging you. I'm holding you accountable. So whether they like it or not, to me, is sort of irrelevant. It's how are they defining it that's the problem. Like, that's where the coaching opportunity is. And we can just leave the facts off the table too. That's another option. You could just say, fine, we won't talk about the facts. What do you think about whatever this is? I think people should be flexible. Okay. And when you think that way, how do you feel when they're not? Right? And then what do you do when you feel that way? And so we just sort of, you know, one of the things I do with a lot of people when they argue with me that a thought is a fact, like they'll say, my boss is trying to get me fired or something. And I'm like, okay, well, that's kind of a thought. No, it's true. I totally know it's true. Have they told you they're trying to get you fired? No. But I just know they are. Okay, all right, cool. Let's just keep it. I'm going to give it to you as a circumstance. Let's pretend it's a fact. I have no idea if it is, but let's just pretend. Then what? Now what do you think about that? Right? My boss is trying to get me fired. If that's a circumstance, what are you thinking? Right? And then they're going to tell you, I'm going to lose my job and I'm terrified. I'm not going to be able to pay my mortgage, right? My wife or husband's going to be mad at me, you know, whatever. So now we're talking about a thought anyway. So just, you know, I don't take, like, the thought model for me is just so powerful that I don't need to indulge arguments over it. I just continue on. Like, okay, well, it looks like you're pretty frustrated. What's going on in your brain? Why are you so frustrated? I just keep moving. Don't get worried about it if they don't agree with you. It's fine.
All right, great. This is an interesting question. This person is asking, can you use the CTFAR, the thought model, in a sales call?
Yeah.
As in working through the stages with the client.
Go, baby. So, you know, I used to work in sales. That's my background. And I taught every single person in my organization, which, by the way, was a top performing organization. So I will use my results as my credibility here. Absolutely. What is an objection? An objection is a thought. I can't afford it. Right now, it's not a good time. I need to talk to my husband. Right? Objections are thoughts. Oh, okay. So when you think you can't afford it, how do you feel? Do you feel worried? Like, right? It's absolutely a powerful tool. Limited beliefs are absolutely, so limited thinking, limited thoughts are absolutely why people don't buy. So yes, 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 all around yes. And really, especially if you manage sales reps or salespeople, because you know, the sales is 95% mindset, 5% skill. No offense, skilled salespeople, right? It really is. The people who are the most successful in sales are the ones who conquer their brain. They're able to handle rejection. They're able to handle no. They're able to ask for business repetitively and not get uncomfortable and avoid. They're able to ask for referrals, right? So effective sales in general is about understanding that thoughts control the decisions that people make. So great question.
All right, cool. Okay, so we have a question from Franklin, and he's asking how best to manage what what he calls quote unquote bad employees. So these employees that are very difficult, they're negative. You know, there's several generations in his workplace at the same time. They have different values and motivations. Sometimes he feels these people are very lazy. All these different things. So just bad, difficult employees. In your opinion, given your long experience or the experience of colleagues, how can such a situation be resolved? It's a big question.
I teach a whole day workshop on this. I don't know what
Right.
part of the world you live in, but you should know. Okay, so the quick answer, manager, is first of all, you have to not label your employees difficult or lazy or entitled or arrogant or rude or disrespectful. Those are thoughts that you have about their behavior, and those thoughts will trigger feelings in you, which will trigger your behavior. And so inevitably what I first would do with you is first, let's make sure that you're clean and that you're showing up in a way that is effective as a leader, because nothing gets in the way more than the way that we label people, right? When I label somebody something, it changes me, not them. They just are doing what they do in the world. So what we first want to do is pull apart our thinking from what's actually happening. So if I have somebody who I believe is lazy, I want you to put what is it that you see them doing in the circumstance line. They lean back in their chair. They wander around the office. They wear earbuds all day. They slump. They miss deadlines. These are actual provable things that they do. That's what we address with them. We address what they do in the world, not our label. So in its simplest form, we say, hey, employee, I noticed that you were slumping in your chair, listening to music in your earbuds, and missed 3 deadlines. What's going on? Versus, hey, employee, I've noticed how lazy you've been lately. Does that make sense? So we want to make sure that we're not coaching them from our point of view, that we are coaching them from evidence and what is actually going on.
All right, great. So we have a student named Jennifer. She says that she has an employee who never takes responsibility for anything that is bad or wrong. Every time that she tries to address the situation with her, the employee sends blame other places and cries. I find myself getting more and more frustrated. Overall, she's a good employee, or he's a good employee. Not sure how to work through this, though.
Okay, that's a good one. First of all, when people don't accept responsibility, that is just a defense mechanism, right? It's just a way to not have to deal with whatever's going on. So part of what we have to think about is how we respond when they do that, okay? So if my employee, and crying is one I actually I talk about this a lot in my live workshops because there are criers. And I know we can't have an interactive conversation. My dog's gonna bark again. But we wanna make sure that crying is an emotion that passes over your body. And for some people, they cry, and it's like a wave and it goes on, and then after 30, 60 seconds, it's over. So sometimes the best thing to do when people cry is just sit in the silence and let them cry. You feel how uncomfortable just that was? Right then. It's pretty hard to do because what we want to do is start asking, like, what's wrong? Why are you upset? Oh my goodness, you know, just hand them a tissue and let them have their moment. What happens a lot of times, and I don't know if this is the case for you, but what happens a lot of times is we let them cry, and then we excuse the meeting. And when we end the meeting, they know that crying works. And it's a way to not have to be held accountable, right? So we have to be careful as managers how we're participating in that. So that's one thing I would just give you awareness. It's okay for people to cry in your office, but I wouldn't, and you can be graceful and kind, but let let them move through it, okay? Not accepting, second piece, not accepting accountability is a performance issue. And so if this is a chronic issue where every time you point out something that wasn't done correctly or didn't get done or what have you, and they're always blaming someone else, that is in and of itself something that probably needs to be addressed as a performance issue. Because that is interrupting and affecting their ability to perform, right? So how do we do that? We tell them, and we use it just like I just did with the last question, right? The last 4 times we've talked about your performance, you have said, and you say very specifically what they said. So we don't say you're not taking responsibility. We just say, you have said, it's not my fault. John didn't do his job, so I couldn't do mine. This work is too, whatever they say. And then you tell them what the impact of that was on the organization and their performance. And you tell them what will happen if they don't start to accept responsibility for their work. So I do think that's there's 2 things we're talking about. There's the crying, which is sometimes just a defense mechanism that can be effective. And then there's holding people actually accountable for the behavior. And the thing I want to say about that, just to take it one more step, for those of you who've been in the program for a while, if we have to have set expectations, accepting responsibility, demonstrating ownership in your work, being responsible, however that is, if that isn't part of your expectations that you've set with your team members somewhere along the line, please remember that. That can be part of what needs to happen here is you've got to calibrate. Like, as a team, we accept responsibility for our performance. We don't shirk it. That's who we are. This is what we do. We accept responsibility. We focus on solutions and we move on. So if you haven't set expectations, I would also invite you to look at that as well, those 3 areas. What else, Dan?
All right.
Dan?
We've got about 6 or more questions, so just kind of keep that in mind with the time we have. So Sebastian is asking, how would you face a coaching conversation to an employee that systematically avoids any kind of teamwork, no matter whom he or she should be working with?
Well, okay, so first of all, is it required of the job? And if so, how? And is that clear? So that's the first thing I would ask, right? You've got to make sure that teamwork is part of the job requirement. If that's the case, then it's a performance issue. But we want to first find out why. So, for example, I was working with someone recently who said, I've told my manager to do this so many times, every time I've met with him, and he still hasn't done it, and I've asked him to do it so many times. And so I said, well, have you asked him why he hasn't done it? And she said no. And the reason that she hadn't asked him why is because she made assumptions about why he hadn't done it. So in her mind, that question was answered. So we hadn't even asked. So that would probably be the first thing I would ask is, Sebastian, is, why aren't you working with the team? Why do you avoid the team? Whatever it is that's happening, what's going on? And you're going to hear, this employee will tell you all their thoughts. And it could range from I hate them all to I'm intimidated to I'm just shy to I'm an introvert to I don't feel like they like me. I mean, we don't know unless you know, right? So asking why, exploring that, asking if they'd like help because it's a part of the job. Would you like some coaching? Would you like to work on it? And then ultimately, though, if it really is a part of their performance expectations, we've got to address it.
All right, great. Next question is from Carell, and Carell is asking, I think that one of the main competencies a manager coach needs is relationship building. Is this correct? First question. And if it is correct, what if the manager is just not any good at that? Is there any other way to compensate for the lack of that skill? Okay,
so first of all, that's a thought. I'm not good at that. the better and more probably neutral way to say that is this is a skill I'm still developing. There are parts of people's lives where they're exceptional at relationships. So we have to be careful that we just say I'm not good at it. What I hear when I say that is, for whatever reason, some managers feel uncomfortable. And man, I have coached these managers. Like I had somebody who, got feedback on a 360 that she wasn't approachable and, people didn't feel connected to her. And she said, I don't understand that. I have an open door policy. Anybody can come talk to me anytime. And I said, yeah, but maybe you just kind of want to walk out on the floor and, say hello and greet people. And she said, oh my gosh. And then I have to hear about their family, what they did over the weekend. And I'm like, yeah, kind of. So, Corel, the thing that I would say is, if it doesn't come naturally, it's a skill to develop. If it's a skill to develop, then we have to practice. And that means we got to find one thing we can focus on, to work on. And so it could honestly be that very simple thing of just making sure that once or twice a week, this manager goes out and has a 4-minute conversation with 3 people on their team. They ask about how things are going. They can and I do know that, I've taught emotional intelligence, that this is we do have to develop these skills, and many people do. But I would invite you not to believe, and I don't know if this is about you or someone else, but I would invite you to believe that it's not that they're not good at it. It's just that they haven't developed it as a skill at work, because most people are good at relationships at somewhere in their lives, some different part of their lives. Thanks. That's a good question.
All right, great. I think I'm pronouncing this right. Georgie, I think, has been working with a thought model for about a year and has noticed that the most confusing part is that I guess it's causing a little bit of friction with her coach E when they're asking about their feelings. It says might be more relevant for our European mindset or might not. Anyway, I guess the question here is, have you encountered this before? And I'm sure you have. And what recommendations would you give for coaching in that scenario where employees are having difficulty thinking about their feelings?
Yeah, it's common. People don't like to talk about their feelings, especially people like work people, right? That just evokes all this wait a minute, am I in therapy? What's happening? And what I say to people is, no, I'm not here to have this deep talk about your feelings. I just want you to understand that the feeling that you have, and we all have them. But we don't have, even the most outwardly stoic person has feelings happening in their body. They're just really good at ignoring them. Right? And that's, a lot of adults have gotten really good at ignoring their emotions. And so all we want to know, and what we want them to know, is it's not about having these touchy-feely, tell me about your feelings kind of conversations. It's about understanding that this barometer is happening in your body. This feeling is setting off action. And if we want to change the action, we have to connect it. But just the fact that they believe that talking about feelings causes friction, right? I imagine the emotion that triggers for them is defensive, protective, rigid. I'm just making stuff up at this point, but right? So that's even in of itself is evidence to them. How their belief that talking about feelings is a problem is causing paralysis in their ability to move forward. I hope that's helpful. So, I think it's more about, in that case, what you're probably getting evidence of is someone who's got a pretty processed way of thinking. And so what we want to do is help them understand the discussion on feelings is not a touchy-feely thing. It's a science thing. Feelings make us do stuff. action doesn't just miraculously happen. Action is the result of our emotion.
All right, great. Thank you, Kris. All right, so Luca asked an interesting question. He or she says, in most of the examples, both in the webinar and in the course, I saw one-to-one situations. Does that mean it's better not to apply the thought model in a group session?
Okay, so there's a couple ways I want to answer this. The first, so my easy, simple answer is no, it applies everywhere. It applies to grocery clerks. So when we are, because I facilitate workshops with live people all the time, right? And I'm constantly harnessing what people say and identifying thoughts and how that's triggering their behavior. We want to be careful in a group that we have permission to coach. So that, first of all, is what I would say. Like, if you've got 20 people and someone says, that's ridiculous, I hate that, and then you want to coach them on whatever they said, you want to make sure you have permission to do that, because if you don't, that can go way south on you real quick, especially in a group, right? And I'm assuming you know that, but I'm just sort of saying that. Where this also is pretty, I just wrote a blog about this actually, or maybe I did I don't know, maybe I did a podcast, I can't remember. Where I talk about group thoughts, and that teams can have thoughts about things. Teams can have thoughts about their manager. Teams can have thoughts about their company. Teams can have thoughts about a project. And the thoughts of the individuals, then they share those with one another, and it becomes a group thought. And so then you do have to address the thoughts of the group as like an entity. And how, because we all believe that this is an impossible goal, how do we all feel when we believe this is impossible? Helpless. Okay, and how do we act when we feel helpless? We don't focus on our job. And then what's the result? We don't achieve the goal, right? So yes, so groups also have thoughts. It's part of norms and cultures. And that can be a big win for an organization if you can help groups change the way they think. I hope that answers your question.
I think it gets us there. Thanks, Kris. I think we have two more questions that I think would be good to answer in this session. And that is, how would you apply the thought model with a talented employee who overperforms his superior? I think they mean manager as well. And as a result, this fact undermines that superior's credibility before management above that person. This person, Zoltan, is worried that it will lead to a situation where one of them will have to leave, which is a loss to the organization overall.
So what I really want to do with this question is coach the manager. Mm-hmm. Because this sentence, I'm looking at it because I had to read it. Employee who overperforms his supervisor. As a result, this fact undermines the superior's credibility before higher management. That is a thought. Unless somebody told you your employee is undermining your performance and credibility, then that is a thought that the manager thinks. And when a manager believes that an employee is undermining them, we have to ask ourselves, okay, how does that manager feel? And I would guess it's not good. Resentful, betrayed, helpless, powerless, angry. And that drives behavior, which is not contributing well to the organization. What I always invite people to think about is top performers are good stuff. I spend most of my time helping managers deal with difficult performers and non-performers. If we have a top performer who is trying to show off their skill, then the other approach is to be all in with that performer and to highlight that performer and to show how by having that performer on my team, it makes me look good as a manager. So, there's a lot in here I can't see based on this circumstance, so I'm just taking a crack at it. But both don't have to leave unless there's, you guys can't communicate. But from my perspective, just based on what I read here, that's just two people who think something about one another that is preventing a more beneficial, mutually beneficial relationship. Top performers can be some of the most high maintenance people to manage because they can be pretty demanding, right, Dan? From experience. But they can be also very, very valuable to the organization and to your success. But you've got to figure out, okay, where am I getting stuck here? Am I just being defensive? Right? I don't know the answer, but I would invite you to get kind of out of your circumstance a little bit and look at this a little differently. What if this person wasn't trying to make you look bad? What if the only person who's compromising credibility is you and the way that you think about it?
All right, great.
Probably not the answer that Zoltan wanted. But.
All right, and if you have time for just one more quick question, I think this is an important one. And that is, how do you effectively coach a person in a different geographic boundary? I think a lot of our employees nowadays are working in remote managerial situations, and I think that's an important question for the century we live in. Yes.
So I've managed a virtual team. My last job, I had a virtual team, and they were all coaches. So the key here is communication. You have to talk to them more, not less. When we have a virtual team, humans are humans are humans. And I don't care what anybody wants you to believe about technology, people still want to feel connected. So whatever you can do, like I always had a one-on-one every week with every person on my team. I always had a team meeting every week where we all got on the phone. And then I was very available to them through other means of communication. But that FaceTime, that connect time, that opportunity to meet with you is vital to a virtual team. So your presence, you have to actually work harder to have presence with a virtual team because it is harder to get in front of them. But that would be my initial cure. I would make sure is that it's just high touch, high touch. And then, you've got to really get very good at listening to what they say, because if we're going to do this kind of coaching, we have to listen for skill set and mindset challenges. I was just on a call, like I said before this, and I was coaching a woman who has to lay off about 20 people on her team. And we were talking about, she was concerned about how everybody's thinking about it, which certainly makes sense. She's got some senior staff that are going to be the ones who actually execute on this layoff. And so she's concerned about their thinking and all this stuff. And then I asked her, I said, have these directors ever laid anybody off before? And she said, no. And I said, okay. So then we had to come up with a skill set training plan in addition to coaching their mindset, right? We needed both. And so when you are on the phone or you're on video with these virtual employees or clients, you have to just practice your listening skills and listening for the difference between, okay, am I dealing with someone right now who needs a little bit of skill set transfer work or mindset coaching?
All right. I think with that, we'll end since we are past 10 o'clock. I wanted to thank Kris. Thank you for joining us for this first webinar. I think this went fantastic.
Dog barking and all?
I think so. I think everyone appreciated your insights and everything. And I also wanted to thank all of the participants who joined us today. You all had fantastic questions, and I think this was a really great session. So just to let everyone know, we are planning to do this in an ongoing manner. Pretty much, I think we're aiming for every last Thursday of the month at 9 o'clock Pacific Standard Time. So look for us again in September. We'll probably send out a message about the session, a week or so prior, again, just like this time, and hope to see many of you there again. So thank you, everyone, and have a great rest of your day.
Thank you, guys. Have a great afternoon or day or morning or wherever you are. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.